Hi, Deepti. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on this podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Simit. Thank you so much for having me. And the topic today, I think, is something that, I'm any day happy to talk about.
So we know each other for, I don't know, like how many years? Like 10 years, and we have some common connections, and it's always good to chat with people and get their insights on things, like their experiences. And Dipti has been a Chevening fellow. She went to ITS to study masters in globalization and development. So today we are going to be talking about like her experience of being a Chevening fellow and about studying it at IDS, which also recently it got as number one in the global rankings for the seventh consecutive year for development studies. So congrats, Dipti, for this as well.
Same to you, yes.
Great. So let's get directly into the topics. Do you
Yeah.
want to share your kind of experience? Because I'm sure like you must have gone through the kind of process that people go through when they are applying for this scholarship.
Yeah, actually, it was a, nerve-wracking experience, to be honest. One, because of the scholarship application process, any application process, by the way. But two, I think also, if I were to speak about my younger self, 10 years ago, a person, with not as wide of an exposure from a city, let's say, or metro city, Delhi or Bombay, always worked in my hometown only. Somewhere, I just wasn't even sure whether I deserve it. I think so. Those are the more challenge that I think I had as a person, as a young person, then was more within me than, they were really inevitably outside of my environment. So, to be honest, I think when I was applying, and this was not the only application or only program that I was aiming at. I landed on Chevening by chance just 2 days ago before the deadline. My first feeling was, this really the adrenal rush, like running down the entire body, telling me that the 2 days, no way, because you will have to write, one, you will have to think and reflect. What is it that you are, whether you are a fit, what the Chevening scholarship is looking for. One is that. The second, that when even if I have, let's say, written down something, and Simit, I want to highlight this, that a lot of us, irrespective of our education and our experiences and skill sets, I think communication and articulation is something that is an underrated skill that we don't really pay attention to. What I'm trying to say here is that it's almost like a sales job, right? You are selling yourself to somebody who sees the value that you're bringing. So I think that is where also I was very, very nervous that am I going to be convincing enough for the scholarship to consider me. Then the last thing that I was worried about, that how am I going to get and who will review my application before I submit it, because I'm sure we all go through this when we are writing something. We are in the flow and we've read it so many times that we actually stop seeing the problems in it, because this is just there. And so 2 days, how much break will I have to actually sleep over it and come back and review? So I think if I were to give anybody an advice today preparing for it, I would just say that, have enough time. It is very important. Have somebody to review it. And third, definitely submit it before the deadline, because there are issues with the, last time submission, because you may miss answering some question, or you may, misrepresent some information while submitting your application. In fact, I felt that I was, I nearly made that mistake when I had submitted my application. A very small questions answer, which I thought that I had messed up. In my head, it was very important, and I felt, really devastated after submitting my application, thinking that I would never get through. It's very important that somebody is reviewing your application and that you are presenting and articulating your application and your idea, very clearly and in the concise manner.
Of course, this was a time before Chat GPT, right?
So yeah, I still do not know how that functions, but yeah.
But I mean, you also mentioned that you got it kind of reviewed, like from someone. So, also, what did you write in your SOP? Like, which kind of helped you get through?
An SOP is essentially your sales document. Basically, you're telling the other person that what is it that you're selling to them. I think selling in the sense that you have some value that you are bringing on the table, and really communicating that. So what does that SOP mean here? Any evening applicant, I'm sure Simit had written an SOP for the university. And the university, you would just think that, yeah, I have to take an admission, why I have to write this whole thing? But this is how it works. The university also is looking at that, why do I take this particular student and invest in them, prepare them for future, and have 50 other people in my classroom, and how will the classroom learning will be enriched? That's basically part of the reason why. And not just that, also the seriousness of you coming for that course. So I had also written those SOPs, and basis those, the university, where I had applied, had selected me, and I had an unconditional offer. Now, should I be actually copying that into my evening application? I think a lot of times there is the temptation of that, because you've written something and you're like, "Is अच्छा मैं दोबारा नहीं लिख सकती, इसी को copy कर देती हूँ." I think we may run into that cycle, that yeah, or we just think यार 4-5 लोगों का मंगाओ और उनका देखते हैं और किसी का यहाँ पे कर देते हैं. I'm telling you this because I've seen people doing it this also. In fact, I have seen some of the people that I knew, getting the applications of other people's SOPs and then mixing them up and then getting somebody to review, so that, it becomes, because plagiarism is a big issue in UK, and I think in most places. So there are softwares that will find out whether you have copied and pasted, and nobody would appreciate that, because it is about being authentic. So I would suggest the way to go about it is that, first of all, what I did was I really reflected on the ideas of the leadership, because that is one focus in Chevening Scholarship. Where have I demonstrated the leadership, and how do I define the leadership? And instead, going in like really beautiful, ornamentally, written leadership definitions, I actually defined how I looked at the leadership for me, and how I have demonstrated those, and one or two very crisp examples I have given. Then the second focus in evening, what they are looking at is that, the network, like how do you build the relationships, and how do you look at the professional relationships, the experiences that you've had so far, and how would you think that you would expand when you are given this chance to study in the UK university. The third piece is that, what is it that you will do with that? What will you bring back to the country, which means really your vision, the vision for the, short term, medium term, and long term. So 5 year, 10 year, 15 years, that when somebody's investing in you, it is somebody's money, and it's actually the taxpayers' money
Right.
that UK government puts into you. How do you look at that? So that is the third part, which I also mentioned, how I was looking at if I particularly studied this course. And then also the fourth aspect, which I think is the third, but the fourth aspect is the particular course that you're thinking about. So what is it that in that particular course, which is aligned to your values, which is aligned to your vision and future that you are envisioning? And within that, how do you see that you will be contributing, bringing the influence and the leadership? So I think these are the four things, and I would suggest anybody writing that SOP that please write it from scratch, number one, and two, be authentic and honest about it. It's okay that you may not consider that this is that grand. It does not have to be grand. Whatever it is, if you're proud about it, mention that.
I want to move on to the next part, which is basically now you have been like after Chevening, you worked with various nonprofits and you have been working in the development sector, like in various roles. So how has the experience of like having gotten a Chevening scholarship, how has that kind of helped you play like a positive role in the communities that you're working with?
Yeah, I think I'm glad we're talking about this now. I think, immediately after Chevening fellowship scholarship, when I had come back, one, you have spent time in a country which is very different from yours. So Chevening per se, is actually the whole experience of experiencing UK, the culture, the ethos of that country, the ethos of the academic experience there, and also it's very multi cultural and international. that you have people from around the world. I mean, my class had, the people from 7 different countries. Um, and so, when you come back, it has made a huge impression on you about a lot of things. So I also came back and I was, in one way was super enlightened, but at the same time, I would also say that it was also super lost. I think I had come back, and in fact, during the year itself, there I started feeling that I need to explore a little bit more to be able to see how do I best fit into the development sector and how best I can contribute. And one thing that was very clear around that time is that going back to the same job or the same organization, the same town mostly, is going to be limiting for me. This is how I think. I'm not saying that this is the right thing to think or wrong way to think, but I decided to come back and actually explore different development frameworks. So I was working with the grassroots. I decided to work with international organizations and also with not implementation, but more strategy, policy, advocacy sort of organizations I have chosen. I think to me it was really important that I understood the entire framework by working in it, and also gaining some other skills which I didn't have. So all of this, when I look at now, Simit, I think it wouldn't have happened if Chevening did not happen.
So yes, Dipti, so you're very right in terms of, I mean, one of the things that any international university or, especially, I mean, studying in Britain, for example, one thing that you get access to is networks, right? And then how do you kind of build onto those networks? How do you leverage those networks? Because at the end of the day, like you have studied for a year or let's say 2 years, right? But uske baad, like after that, like it's essentially these networks that kind of help you in your professional life and generally, like once you have come back and started working in the space. So yeah, I mean you're very right, and you made a very kind of valid point on that front. I mean, if you had to share like or give advice to individuals, like to people who are applying for a Chevening scholarship, maybe let's say 5 tips for people like who are applying for this, like what would you say?
Okay, so I think, so one is that start early. I think this is the first tip that, Chevening program happens every year. So you start writing your SOPs, applying to universities, get your unconditional offers. I think this is a good idea. Starting early also means that you have more time to reflect, which is actually the second tip is that take time. Take time to reflect who you are, what sort of person you are, what your journey is, how do you look at the leadership in you, irrespective of how people define leadership. And leadership is not, I always say, leadership is not the position. It's not the hierarchy. It's actually the natural disposition, like how you are as a person, how you lead in terms of, like a change that you see. The third point is that be honest. That does not mean that you overboast and, just go and say things that actually are not real, because people are smart enough when people,
Right.
if you do, let's say, crack the application process to reach to the level of interview, personal interview, people will be able to see through you, because we are smart enough to play on our guts and we know, when somebody lies. So I think honesty is the best policy. The fourth is, please write your SOP and get it reviewed, and reviewed by different 2 3 people, and don't be ashamed by the fact that they will see something in you. And I think it's a good idea to have, it also helps you open up to the feedback. And the last is that when you are submitting your application, have some time, breathe, don't rush yourself. Whether interview happens or not, please don't be disheartened, because a lot of this, it did not happen this year. Don't lose the heart. You can try again. I can tell you from my friends' experiences, this Indonesian friend of mine, she said that she applied Chevening 3 times, but she was
Right.
determined. She was determined and she got it third
Wow.
time. So I think have that sort of grit, that you will. It's okay if you didn't apply, if you didn't get through this year. There are many people who apply. Also, try and understand the person or the Chevening program people sitting on the other side of the table. It's not personal. It's not about you. Anybody making an investment would want to make the best investment. So are you the best investment? So consider it like that. And so that brings me to my final point, is that the SOP is not for you to flaunt things. The SOP is for you to really present your authentic self, your values, and your ideas and vision. That is, something that will move anybody to invest in you. So yeah, I think these are a few things I would say.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was really helpful. I'm sure a lot of people will find this very useful, when they are applying for a Chevening scholarship. I wanted to touch upon like one part that we haven't explored in any detail, which is the interview part. Like, how intense are these interviews? Like, and what was your experience like? Were you like super prepared, or was it like, let's see how it goes? And how was it for you?
Interviews are always nerve-wracking, right? Because see, because so one is that writing. When you are writing something, you have time to think, to read what you're saying, and then revise it, delete it, make some changes again, sleep over it and look at it next day. So interviews are not like that. I mean, irrespective whatever mandate is given to you and you prepare for it, interviews are in the real time, on the spot. It's like, if you miss the frame, you miss the frame.
Mm.
So I think it was nerve-wracking for me also. I had traveled from Udaipur to Delhi because you have to come to Delhi, and in the British High Commission you have to appear. And British High Commission can be intimidating, and I'm not saying in a negative sense, because earlier that point of time you would have to leave your phone also. And in fact, even today, I think when you're going in a certain building or something, the phones are not allowed. So you have to switch off your phone. You have to give, which means, I mean, it just makes you feel a little bit more intimidated. That's the only thing. And then
Right.
the second is that the panel, right? So I will tell you, there were, I think, four people in the panel. There was one person who was not Indian, and three other Indian people. And one was actually not from Chevening office also. This person was actually representing that particular company that was investing, or it was a funder for that particular Chevening program that year.
Right.
So it is intimidating because there are four people, there are eight pair of eyes that are looking at you, constantly judging you. um, so I would say what I did was, and I do it even today. We all have stage fears, and I think one thing that I always do is that the way I want to put it is that I go and search my authentic self. I always be very natural, in the sense I just be myself, which means that if I'm very animated, because I am a very animated person, so I'm animated. It does not matter. I smile a lot. In any case, I smile quite a lot, even when people don't smile back. So, I just go into that space. Third is that I'm also, try and say what I really believe in. I think that really does help in your interview. So even when I had the question was there, I had to present my you can say my SOP in 3 minutes in one way. Like, so why do I think that I am a leader? What do I think that I will do with my course, and why this particular course, and why this particular university? And then third, like why will like what is it that I will do when I come back, and how do I think the network will help me, and all of that. So these are like fairly 4 or 5 questions that will be there, and you have to speak for 3 minutes without any pause, basically, like
Right.
explaining. So I had prepared that, and trust me that it wouldn't go the way you've planned, because you would fumble. But allow yourself, be kind to yourself. I would say that is most important. Allow yourself to be kind and stay true to yourself. I think that's the only thing that has ever helped me crack any interview, not just evening,
Right.
where I have been just myself. And if I did not know something, I have very honestly said that I do not know about this, or I have not studied, or I have not read about this. I think that helps rather than making things up. I think it just doesn't help.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, before we end, like there was one thing that I wanted to check. So I personally, like I had before I went to do my master's at ITS, I had worked for 5 years, so I had like a fair understanding of actually working and getting actual experience versus let's say someone who's just starting out. So I mean, what would be your advice, or what are your thoughts?
So my first very quick answer would be that do what works for you. Okay. I would tell you the second answer, which is a little longish and more personal, is that I think that, we are different people at different stages. I mean, in my 20s, I don't think if I had done it, of course, it would have had a different outcome. But I don't think I knew who I was. So, I mean, I was much more in sync with my own being when I was in my 30s is when actually I also chose to do this, the scholarship and the study abroad. And I had 11, 12 years of work experience. I think that really, is like a decade of your youngest self, that you give, also meant that I knew about development like completely in terms of like how to implement. Like I knew development and nobody had to teach me that. And then why then still going made actually a huge difference for me. One, now having done this, how do I look at it? One, making a step back and reflect with a structure in an academic setting. I think it was a huge advantage I did that. So I personally think that was a brilliant choice I made. Of course, at the time when I was doing it, I didn't think like that. But uh, when I sat in the classroom and I was now looking at development theories, I was able to connect it with my personal experience and not just connect it with the personal experience that I had done, bring out those insights and share it with my colleagues there. And that meant that we had much more richer discussion because in my class, particularly in my class, the average age was actually 30, 32. And that meant that everyone was coming with some life experience also. So, the level of respect, the level of cooperation and collaboration was of a different kind. So I think if I was a young person, I don't think I would have had the ability to critically appreciate anything because I didn't have that experience under my belt.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be here, and it was wonderful to chat with you. And you almost kind of took me back like 12 years, because in my mind I'm right now like I'm at IDS,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Robert Chambers participation workshops are like, something that I miss. I really think that we should do something of some same sort here in India. Maybe, Simit, that is what we can do as ideas alumni.
absolutely, let us figure a way out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Deepti. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simit, for, making me go back in time and reflect on these. Thank you.
Thank you.